This is Scott Spratt from ProFootballFocus.com Fantasy, and this is another Fantasy Slam. The Atlanta Falcons backfield has become a very interesting story so far this season in fantasy. Towards the end of last year, Steven Jackson sort of re-emerged, scoring several touchdowns down the stretch and finally looking healthy for the first time in his Atlanta tenure. He's been the lead back so far for Atlanta this year as well, but he's only on pace for 750 rushing yards and 900 combined yards. Part of that is the typical problem for Atlanta is bad offensive line. They're the 5th worst run blocking team based on Pro Football Focus's offensive line rankings. But the other major problem has been the distribution of work. Their backfield is actually starting to look like division rival Carolina's in that they're splitting carries between several different backs. This season, that split has favored Jackson, but it hasn't been much of a sweep. Jackson has 63 carries compared to Jacquizz Rodgers has 19, rookie Devonta Freeman 19, and Antone Smith 11. The same thing is true with the targets as well, where Freeman actually leads the way with 13 targets, Jackson has 11, and then both Rodgers and Smith each have 8. As such, it's going to be really difficult for Jackson or for any of those players to emerge as even a flex consideration at running backs in shallower formats. Many people thought that Freeman may be the player that could break out of this mix, but in my mind, he's been the least effective player of the bunch so far this season. And as a 4th-round pick is a little bit undersized at 206 pounds, it could be a little bit before Freeman becomes a real impact player in fantasy. The player that has me intrigued right now is actually Antone Smith, who is much smaller than Freeman or anyone else on the team at only 191 pounds, and isn't exactly a young player at 29 years old. But Smith has done nothing but produce in his limited opportunities so far in his career with Atlanta. Over the last 2 seasons, Smith has 17 carries for 263 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's a 15.5 yards per carry mark. He also has 8 receptions for 166 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns in that time, which is 20.8 yards per reception. I mean, that's unbelievably effective on a per-play level. And obviously Smith hasn't been getting a ton of work, but I think the continued success in those limited opportunities are going to force the hand of the Falcons to actually use Smith more and more. And he doesn't have to be that amazing a player on a per-touch basis to become an effective player if he starts getting even 8 touches per game. So in shallower formats, I'm actually looking at Smith as my favorite potential running back in this backfield. I'd rather swing for the fences when I know that Jackson doesn't really have an upside as even a running back 2 anymore. So I think I'm looking at Smith as a potential pickup this week in shallower formats, and in deeper formats, I'm definitely looking to grab Smith just to check and see if this could potentially work out in the long run. For Pro Football Focus Fantasy, this is Scott Spratt.